Yes, the honourable member for St. James North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I first wish to intervene in this debate by commending the Honourable Leader of the Opposition for bringing this resolution before this Parliament today. She, in her marathon, over 5.5-hour speech, prosecuted the government of this country admirably and showed how it has failed the people of Barbados in each and every sector of the economy and society. This resolution simply states what the vast majority of people in my constituency of St. James North are saying every single day. Not only the vast majority of people in my constituency are saying what this resolution outlines, but the vast majority of Barbadians are saying this as well. They are saying that they have no confidence whatsoever in this government's ability to take us out of this socio-economic malaise that it has put us in over the last 8 years. They are saying that they have no confidence in the ability or capacity or capability of this government to properly manage and to effectively manage this nation's affairs of state or to govern in the best interests of the people. Every day, people ask me, when will the Barbados Labour Party force an election? When are elections going to be called? When are you all going to be able to get rid of this Democratic Labour Party government that has become a burden, a complete obstacle around the necks of the people of Barbados? The Right Honourable Prime Minister's recent statement that to experience Easter Monday, you have to experience Good Friday is of course correct within its biblical context, but it is totally out of sync with what is happening in real terms in Barbados today. Good Friday suffering has gone on for too long now, for 8 years. And Easter Sunday is nowhere in sight. This Democratic Labour Party government came into office in 2008 to back on a firm foundation laid by the outgoing Barbados Labour Party government. Unemployment was down to record levels, the lowest it had ever been since the abolition of slavery 175 years ago, down below 7%. Foreign reserves were at its highest. Barbados occupied a leading role in the affairs of the CARICOM. The ball started to swing and seam, and the Democratic Labour Party, with their abysmal batting technique, soon got Team Barbados in real trouble. First thing, Mr. Speaker, a budget was brought by the then Minister of Finance, the then Prime Minister, putting on over $100 million in taxes, taking money out of the economy that people would have spent. Then the Democratic Labour Party failed to make the necessary fiscal interventions before the last general election that should have been made on the political expediency of hoping to win an election. That was followed by continuous fiscal adjustments mentioned in the first paragraph of this resolution, strategies that started one after the other, outlined here, starting with the budget of August 2013. All of these fiscal strategies failed the people of Barbados. The result was the laying off of over 3,000 public servants. After the Right Honourable Prime Minister on Saturday, the 27th of October 2012, assured Barbadians that the Democratic Labour Party would not be cutting jobs in the public service. He then said, we are going to protect the people of Barbados and the public service from that kind of political slaughter. It will be a recipe for disaster. Those were the exact words of Right Honourable Prime Minister of Barbados. Yet, those words were not honoured And we talk about sanctimonious hypocrisy by politicians. Those who say those words know about whom they're speaking. The result of this promise being broken meant in fact that not only one, but in many cases both breadwinners in a household no longer have a job. They were fired from their government employment, no longer have financial subsistence to carry their families. Houses have been lost as a result of people's inability to pay their mortgage, as a result of poor fiscal strategies and the incompetence of this Democratic Labour Party government. Young adults who were at the Cave Hill University campus have had to drop out in their thousands as a result of the imposition of tuition fees for the first time in a half a century. People's health care has been placed at severe risk. No right-thinking person can have a modicum of confidence in this government, which in 2008 told us that they will not lie, cheat, or steal, but instead has proceeded to break every major manifesto promise made in 2008 to the people of Barbados. This government has continued to impose draconian taxes and fees on its citizens, over 33 in all in the last 8 years, with removing the vast majority of tax allowances which income earners could have claimed as tax credit, as tax refunds. This has resulted in the demise of the middle class in Barbados. It has resulted in over 20% of people living in this country now living below the poverty line. This government has used the same kind of thinking which it used to create the problems in the first place in its attempt to solve the problems, even although, as Albert Einstein has said, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And all of this has happened with there's been a restriction in the quality of the social services which people had become accustomed to in this country, paid for by their taxes. There's been a diminution in the welfare benefits paid to people. There's been a diminution, as Right Honourable Member for St. George South said, in the benefits from the NIS. In fact, there's been an incapacity to obtain these benefits in many cases, whether they're unemployment benefits, whether they're maternity benefits, whether they're disability benefits. This has especially affected the community of persons with disabilities and senior citizens, two categories in which the most vulnerable persons in Barbados financially are comprised. The end result of government's incompetence, Mr. Speaker, in terms of its economic management and political leadership, has been that Barbados, our beautiful island home, has fallen from a lofty ranking of 37th of 182 nations on the Human Development Index in 2007 to 57th of 188 in 2014. A very large number of Barbadians have no confidence in this government going forward. Again, as the Honourable Member for St. George South pointed out here earlier this evening, the Democratic Labour Party has adopted an anti-trade union stance that is totally despicable and contemptuous. This is the party that used to speak about the poor black man. They're the party that cares about poor black man. Mr. Speaker, to be truthful and in their credit, they have not said that for certainly since I've been in this parliament. So that's to their credit. They've told the truth on that one. The Right Honourable Prime Minister's condemnation in, I think it was July last year, of the NUPW's leadership was despicable and really and truly unbecoming of someone who holds his high office. Reference to the leadership as bandits and people holding guns and as if they want to start a war and that kind of language, people doing what they were elected by their membership to do, represent their union in the face of harsh economic and social policies by an uncaring government. That's all these young folk are doing, and they should have been encouraged. And reference to amending the Constitution, Section 49, to limit trade union rights that have long since been fought for in this Parliament of Barbados under the Barbados Labour Party over 75 years ago. National heroes, Sir Grantley Adams and Sir Hugh Springer. And we're talking about going back and curtailing the power of union activity when this Barbados Labour Party in 1940-41 legitimized that activity. The nowhere, Mr. Speaker, is the incompetence of this government more clearly shown to manage and lead our country than in its educational policies or lack thereof, and in the management of the Ministry of Education. This Minister of Education, the Honourable Member for Christchurch, East Central, is acknowledged as the worst Minister of Education out of the 13 that you had. So acknowledged by the press, by the teachers' unions, by the university students, by the Barbados community college students who now also have to pay tuition fees for their degree programs, by the polytechnic students who can't get their City and Guild certification, and by the parents of children of this country themselves. This country was previously known among small developing countries of newly emerged from the trappings of colonialism. In a day when we're celebrating our 50th anniversary of independence, we were previously known as a country with a globally competitive edge in our educational system that was the envy of many. This sector now, after 8.5 years under the longest serving Minister of Education in our country's history, is lurching from crisis to crisis to crisis. There has been an inability to resolve any union relations dispute with any respective teachers' unions, as a shoot off heads and crack skulls mentality has been adopted. The Barbados Union of Teachers members are now therefore on a work to rule. There's been an inability by this Minister of Education to resolve the growing number of issues relating to student violence, on conflicts between teachers and students, conflicts between principals and teachers on the one hand and parents on the other hand, conflicts between the teachers and the Ministry of Education. The Honourable Minister's approach has been to label some children as demonic and to establish a committee 2 weeks ago to investigate violence in schools, which he says will provide recommendations as to its resolution. This decision, Mr. Speaker, to establish this committee is a complete dereliction of ministerial duty by the person entrusted by this Parliament of Barbados with the very important political mandate for the educational development of our people, especially of our young people. It is indicative of why the general population and the stakeholders in education have no confidence in that honourable member as Minister of Education. Numerous studies have already been undertaken on violence and indiscipline in this country. You had a Law and Order Commission headed by Sir Roy Marshall years ago. The establishment of this committee is merely a substitute for decisive political action, which is now required. The Education Act and the education regulations have sufficient teeth to effectively deal with this issue. It is for these and similar kind of reasons why the people of this country and this opposition party have no confidence whatsoever in the Honorable Minister of Education. There's been a failure to reform the curriculum after 15 years, when the last reform was by the Right Honorable Leader of the Opposition in her capacity then as Education Minister. There's been a failure to reform the curriculum of Barbados in terms of education and to make it more relevant to modern day Barbados. The Ministry of Education, under the leadership of that honourable member, appears to be more concerned with partisan politics and with placing DLP supporters and card-carrying members in positions of influence and authority. There's been the refusal by the honourable minister, a former president of the Barbados Union of Teachers, as the honourable leader of the opposition said earlier today, being advised by a chief education officer and a parliamentary secretary, both of whom occupied senior and top leadership positions in that union for many years. Failure by him to meet with the teachers of this country, over 2,500 teachers. My advice to the teachers of this country is not to meet with him or with any of his supporters in cabinet when they come to you in less than 2 years' time to ask you for a vote. Tell them you will not meet with them if they can't meet with you now. What are they coming at your house for if they are so arrogant and contemptuous of you that they cannot, that you cannot meet with them? What are they coming at your house for now to beg you for a vote? Tell them to disappear from off your property. There's been a failure to appoint hundreds of eligible teachers to permanent positions in spite of promises made over 2 years ago to do so. Only 400 have been appointed when that honourable minister said that he would appoint 800 of them. There's been a failure to resolve the plethora of environmental issues at a myriad number of schools, as this Ministry of Education under the honourable member has no policy of proper maintenance of school plans and infrastructure. There's been a failure to establish a Teachers Service Commission provided for in the Constitution of Barbados over 40 years ago, 1974 amendment, as promised by that honourable member to the teachers of this country at a meeting with them on the 6th of September 2012. At that meeting, he had told them that the paper to establish a Teachers Service Commission, which would solve many of the problems that you have right now, had already gone to cabinet. That was over 3.5 years ago. If all of that, Mr. Speaker, wasn't bad enough, the Honourable Minister has presided over the dismantlement of 50 whole years of hitherto previously free tuition fees, free university education for Barbadians at the University of the West Indies, resulting in the despicable loss of hope for thousands of Barbadians from working class backgrounds. It is a fact of the matter that 80% of the Barbadian students who before used to go to the University of the West Indies were from working class backgrounds. That was the only way out for them to come out of the circumstances of their birth. 14 of the 16 elected Democratic Labour Party members in this parliament may not be in here or in the position they are in, or in a position to raise their salaries by 10% and to be crying over it like the honourable member, like for St. Michael Central here today, if it was not for free tertiary education. And you talk about kicking down the ladder that you climbed up on. And that has been the record of the member for Christchurch East Central. That has been his legacy to the people of Barbados after 8.5 years of holding the political mandate for the education of Barbados. And this is after the Right Honourable Prime Minister in October 2012 committed to Barbadians, as was said by the Honourable Leader of the Opposition at the Barbados Community College graduation, that the Democratic Labour Party will continue to fully fund University of the West Indies education to our citizens. This is why we have no confidence in this government. They do not keep their word. Their word is not being their bond. Well, that was said way back in 1986 when the broader manifesto and then told you it was not a social contract. So that should not have surprised the people of Barbadians. But that is the Democratic Labour Party for you. Cannot take their word, can't trust them. There's been a failure, even after now removing the freeness or the payment of tuition fees by the state for Barbadians. There's now been a failure to clearly enunciate the policies relating to the funding of tuition fees for some university students. We first heard about bursaries 2 years ago. There are going to be these 3,000 bursaries and at $3,000 each. And the bursaries took 19 months to come. And then there were only about 1,500 and there were only about $1,800 a month. By that time, thousands had already dropped out of the university anyway. Then you heard about grants. But that again was after hundreds more had dropped out. And you don't even know up to today, the 10th of May 2016, whether the bursary is done or not, because nothing from the Minister of Education or anyone else in that ministry on that particular issue. And if all of that, Mr. Speaker, wasn't enough, there has been a most despicable act in terms of the Westminster system which we say we operate under. Most despicable act by the Honourable Education Minister. For 14 months now, 14 months ago, in an estimates debate, he made a promise, a pledge. We didn't ask him for it, he volunteered the pledge. He volunteered the promise, the covenant, the undertaking to do something, to send documents to the opposition relating to the educational policy of his ministry. He made that promise, undertaking, covenant, agreement, again, voluntarily, not forced by us, being asked him for it on this floor. He got up on this floor of Parliament and promised to send the documents. And in fact, on that occasion now, 2 months ago, he named the document a 2014 to 2020 draft or strategy paper for the ministry. I followed that up, Mr. Speaker, by writing him personally on it. Well, sir, I'm not a boy in the yard. I elected by thousands of people to come in here, represent them, and the wider people of Barbados. Up to now, that letter written, 21st of March, almost 2 months ago, not even a response by that minister. At least, I must say, the Honourable Minister for Transport, at least when you write him, he responds. Within a week, he personally responds. Don't mind, there's no action on the letter, but at least he acknowledges receipt of it. But that is the contempt that the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central holds this Parliament, because it isn't about me now. You know, I can live. It's this Parliament here that we speak highly of, and 2 years ago I had big thing about the 375th anniversary.
Honourable Member, you have 5 minutes in which to conclude.
Yes, sir. He's no longer fit to be a member of the Cabinet of Barbados. The people of Barbados have lost their trust in this government, led by a Prime Minister who has presided over an administration which has ultimately been marked by broken promises after broken promises. It has failed the people of this country. And the Right Honourable Prime Minister has to take full responsibility for his party's failure to honour its commitments. This laying of resolution that the Honorable Leader of the Opposition spoke about earlier today for a raise in the salaries of cabinet ministers and parliamentary secretaries by 10% in a situation where the public servants of Barbados have not had a salary increase, bar increments for the last 7 years, typifies the callousness, the insensitivity, and the contempt that this government has for the people of Barbados. I could not believe it when this resolution was brought for me, and I understand English, but I was reading and I couldn't believe this, and I called and said, wait, clarify this for me. And when I heard that this is now to raise salaries by 10%, I really and truly found that incredible. Could not believe that a cabinet of Barbados could sit down around a table and agree to raise their salaries by 10%. So what, you're telling me that the $14,000 a month plus allowances of entertainment and travel, plus the per diems of $150 each day US that they get when they travel, as they travel all about the place first class, is not good enough? But it is good enough for thousands of Barbadians to be without a job and to be tonight not having anything to give the children, not knowing that whether they could send the child to school tomorrow, not knowing if they could pay the rent or the mortgage at the end of the month, not knowing if they could carry the old grandmother to the doctor tomorrow. That is really and truly an affront of the highest indignity to the people of Barbados. The Prime Minister has to take full responsibility for the failure of his government to enact prevention of corruption legislation. The Leader of the Opposition today raised issues of corruption, of conflict of interest positions. And his recent statement by the Attorney General of this country that those who draw reference to the failure to enact prevention of corruption legislation, that those who speak about it are making silly noises, really and truly shows that he is unfit to be the principal legal advisor to this government as well. That's what you said. There's been a total lack of accountability and transparency in this government. There's been no freedom of information legislation. Again, a breach of the 2008 manifesto promise. This government doesn't even understand the system of governance, that these are issues that today matter in the world. That if Barbados wants to stand as it stood, as a great country in this world, these are things that have to be brought into place legislatively. But this government, and they would know why they don't want to bring in prevention of corruption legislation. They must know, because if there was no perception or reality of corruption, any government would want to bring it in. That is standard. There's been the issue of the fingerprinting exercise and an attempt to make it seem that those involved in the case...
Honourable Member, please wind up. Your time has expired.
Yes, sir.
Please wind up.
Just this point, sir, if you will allow me. That those involved in the case are looking to breach Barbados security when all we're doing is saying that, one, the legislation was brought wrongly, but by a wrong method, but also that to fingerprint Barbadians is against their constitutional rights. An attempt by a government to deny Barbados their fundamental human rights enshrined by the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, the Covenant of Hope in this Child Month which has been made a document of the House, will restore hope for our country's youth, as opposed to the hopelessness that many are now experiencing under this government. I fully support this resolution, Mr. Speaker, and call on the government of Barbados to dissolve this parliament and to place the fate of our citizens during the foreseeable future in the hands of the electorate, since we cannot, as the resolution says, continue on this path for another 20-odd months. I'm obliged.